This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ying.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, Sherry Horn Hassan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, coming to you on June 3rd, 2021 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. And I'm pleased to announce that my guest today is again professional astrologer RONNIE GALE DREYER. Unfortunately, last week's recording experienced some major technical difficulties, and RONNIE has been kind enough to make time to return to discuss this current eclipse season, which we're still in the middle of right now. So we'll be talking more about this after I introduce her properly in a few. But first, my usual housekeeping stuff, which is to please remind you that you can find my posts on my Karmic Evolution Facebook page, or you can sign up for my Conversations About Consciousness email newsletter, which you can do either by going to my Facebook page and finding the join email list and just filling that out with your email and your name, or shooting me an email, and I'll give you my email in a second. But meanwhile, if you've missed any shows or you want to re-listen to a specific one, you can just go to my website at karmicevolution.com, which is also from where this show broadcasts live, and hit radio show on the upper right-hand corner of the banner. If you scroll down that page, you can access all of the recordings of my past shows. And finally, I'm continuing to offer my discounted 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading to listeners for only $99. This is a reading that helps you identify your soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime, to help you move from chaos to clarity in whatever area of life is presenting you with difficulties, crises, crossroads, etc., whether that's relationships, whether it's career and jobs, finances, or health, and to understand your karmic journey in order to heal old wounds and to co-create your own future happiness and success. If you're interested in awakening to your true potential and your highest destiny in this lifetime, it's easy when you take advantage of my special discounted offer, again for listeners, a 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. Simply email me, and you can use the same email address if you'd like me to put you on my mailing list, and that is Sherry, SHERI, at karmicevolution.com, and we'll get your reading booked today. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. Okay, so let's get on to this week's Astro news you can use. So the monthly lunar cycle's still waning since the May 26th Sagittarius full moon lunar eclipse called us to examine the origin of our personal beliefs and to release our attachment to those which have become dogma. Now, dogma is defined as beliefs based on a principle or a set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true. Okay, what happens is this also becomes part of what forms our ego orientation or our ego narrative, some people call it. So the first lunation in this current eclipse season was the Sag full moon, which was a lunar eclipse that reflected the Gemini sun's light back onto itself. And that, of course, as I said, was May 26th. And it kicked off a period during which we're asked to examine where we may be living based on a set of beliefs that rest on a flawed or a faulty foundation. Why? Why would that foundation be flawed? Because what we believe to be true is actually based on perceptions we formed long ago, both early in this lifetime and during past life karma, that have morphed into a kind of personal mythology to which we become extremely attached over the course of our lives. It's become the story of our life. The trouble is that people, circumstances, and other things change. And the question becomes, can we allow into our consciousness new information, new ideas, and more current perceptions that allow us to adjust, reform, or rewrite this personal mythology in ways that serve us better than before? In short, can we update our beliefs to be in greater alignment with the current times? Excuse me. Since this lunation, we've been tasked with exploring upon what these mythological stories of our own lives rest, and to ascertain where there may be cracks in that foundation. And this means examining our past experiences, including trauma, pain, rage, grief, all the things we tend to remember best, because for better or worse, they wrote the most memorable chapters of our lives and therefore form the basis for our current beliefs. Now, again, when the Sag moon reflected the Gemini sun's light back to itself at that full moon lunar eclipse, we were asked to realize what information's been eclipsed. In other words, what's been hidden from us in the deeper recesses of our unconscious. The moon in psychological astrology always represents our unconscious, and the sun represents our ego, or our conscious description of our persona. So, did we perhaps not perceive and interpret the events in our lives correctly in the past? Because perception is not necessarily based on fact. It's based on what we think that we saw and how we interpret it. Saw, heard, felt, etc. And that's despite the fact that these perceptions may have become a bulwark in our current current belief system, because we incorporated them into our personal mythology. And that's the mythology around which we order and live our lives. It also can explain things like defense mechanisms, which I'm not going to go into in detail, but if we believe a certain thing, we may have developed certain defense mechanisms around that to cope with these beliefs, which are not always positive ones. So since the sun in Gemini is currently being ruled by Mercury, which is now retrograde since May 29th, and will remain retrograde until June 22nd, we know this particular lunation carries much import because it's part of the current eclipse season, even though it's already technically occurred. So this is a time period during which we may re-examine what exactly is our personal mythology, upon what experiences, both current and karmic, it was formed, and how we perhaps perpetuate living out a story that's not really our own. Rather, it was imposed upon us by our own subconscious, which then manifested these experiences externally. So this is really key. And I say it, but probably not often enough, but I have said it before for sure. It's one of my beliefs that one of the keys to greater consciousness is recognizing that we ourselves create our own reality. And once we grasp this concept, the concept of choice has greater meaning. After all, if we're in charge of our ultimate destiny, if we don't believe that we're victims or that, everything is fated to be, then why can't we change the narrative we're living now and transform it into something more soul satisfying? These are the kinds of things we may ponder, review, think about, analyze, write, and dialogue about during Mercury's retrograde in Gemini. And, Gemini, which revolves archetypally around the themes of communication, the rudimentary educational building blocks I've noted before, 1 + 1 = 2. We need to know that to do higher math. ABCs we need to know to be able to read, to understand, to write, as well as the themes of siblings, friends, transportation, and local business. And it actually, Gemini, as representing the third house in the natural chart, also, it's not just siblings, but it's also what we call near family, which is aunts, uncles, and cousins. And because it represents the near neighborhood, it's our friends and extended family. So is it any wonder that I noted last week, and this was right before the eclipse, I believe. No, was it right before or right after? I think it was right before Memorial Day, and the eclipse was the 26th, and Mercury's retrograde was the 29th. So somewhere in between there was a huge amount of publicity around the reunion of the cast of the show Friends. And so I was like, I took note of it because I was like, Mercury retrograde's coming, right? It's like this is the kind of nostalgia that can lead to closer scrutiny of who we miss or who we want to contact, or thinking who have I had not heard from for a while, and thinking of them, and then they contact us. That just happened to me with a friend yesterday. She popped into my mind, and then I was thinking, gee, we haven't talked in a while, and she just Facebooked me and said, hey, we haven't talked for a while. What are you doing? How are you? You've been in my mind. So recontacting people from the past is very much a Mercury retrograde kind of energy. I also found 2 cards. I was cleaning out some old papers and found 2 cards from someone. I think the first one was from someone I haven't spoken to in like 25 years. And it was an unopened Christmas card that I must have just thrown into a pile and then thrown into a bag and then put in the attic, Cancer Moon likes to hoard. And I think the other was from an old boyfriend, but I kind of glanced at it and then tossed it aside. I have to go back to see. But I was like, they're just popping in to say hello, or just to bring up some memories or whatever. So, it's not uncommon that former lovers might contact us, or we might reach out to them during Mercury retrograde. But also, in terms of Mercury retrograde, I thought it was really interesting that just this morning prior to airtime, the news broke that Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, I don't know if it's Louis or Louis, but has been subpoenaed for potential campaign contribution law violations. Now, for those of you who don't know, DeJoy is in charge of the U.S. Postal Service, employees of which represent one of the most Geminian professions you can possibly imagine, because they're the ones who facilitate communication in this country through the collection, processing, and delivering of the mail. And I don't think you can get more Geminian than that. Now, I worked for a few years on 33rd Street between 9th and 10th Avenues in New York City. And so I often walked by the New York City main post office on 34th and 8th, where I was always struck by the inscription emblazoned on the top of the building. It's carved there in stone. And I'd experience a kind of palpable patriotic pride when I read the words, which are neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. So the Washington Post reported just this morning, and I quote here, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy is being investigated by the FBI in connection with his political fundraising. End quote. So he reportedly contributed $1.1 million personally, and here I'm quoting the paper again, to the joint fundraising vehicle of President Donald Trump's re-election campaign and the Republican Party, of trying to undermine his own organization because of Trump's distrust of mail-in voting. And the article continues, in early September, which I assume they mean was 2020, the Washington Post published an extensive examination of how employees at DeJoy's former company, North Carolina-based New Breed Logistics, alleged they were pressured by DeJoy or his aides to attend political fundraisers or make contributions to Republican candidates, and then were paid back through bonuses. Well, that's called a kickback, all right? So let's remember that in Greek mythology, Mercury, the messenger god, was known for his sleight of hand ability, both literally and figuratively. Sounds a bit like DeJoy's pretty good at that, except rather than a literal shell game like the kind that they used to swindle tourists on 42nd Street in New York, he's doing it with real money. He's saying, I pressure you to attend these fundraisers, give money, and then I'm going to kick the money back to you. And apparently that's illegal. So to complicate matters, we're heading for June 5th's Mercury retrograde in Gemini square to Neptune. And this is the second in a series of 3 since the first one on May 22nd and before the third one on July 6th, which will occur when Mercury's direct again, but still in Gemini. So these aspects represent, on a personal level for all of us, a better time to rise above mundane social and mainstream media noise and to seek to connect directly with our inner selves through meditative, mindful, and creative endeavors. Earthly information is subject to further scrutiny now, right? All that glitters isn't gold. We want to be sure that what we're hearing and seeing and reading is taken with a grain of salt, because we recognize that everybody has an ulterior motive. And think, why not bypass all this hype and go straight to divine source energy for answers? Now, June 5th brings also, and I don't know, did I say this? I'm sorry. The way that we connect, right? I said, meditative, mindful, and creative endeavors. This is, taking a walk on the beach or in the woods and doing some journaling. Engaging in any of the arts, whatever they may be. Writing is particularly related to Mercury and Gemini, but Gemini square to Neptune also allows us to visualize. So visual meditations are good ways to go now too, or doing any kind of creative arts that involve drawing or whatever. And of course, Neptune is always about dance. So communicating and music, communicating through the physical act of dancing and using some kind of rhythmic mechanism to chanting or prayer or anything else where we are able to let go of the past and any regrets or guilt, and to let go of worrying about what tomorrow will bring and just be in the moment. Because if we're in the moment, then we're not going to react to all the social media crap, right? June 5th also brings the exact Mars in Cancer opposition to Pluto in Capricorn. And this raises the possibility of external confrontations between two opposing forces, be that on a national or a global scale. So watch the news as this energy waxes. It's been in play for a little while, and it's coming to a head soon. So, what that means exactly, we'll see it in the news, right? On a personal level, however, this energy represents a time when we can conquer our fears about confronting our true selves. Pluto is a planet that represents the unconscious. All the outer planets do. But what we have hidden in our unconscious or subconscious that we fear bringing into consciousness, and understanding that allowing ourselves to do so, to bring these hidden things into consciousness, empowers us rather than weakens us. So determining where we need to rise to the occasion and stand up and fight those who confront us, versus where we may be trying to control people or situations and it's time to accept defeat and move on, is very much on the table right now. So it pays to be mindful and to recognize where is the balance of power in terms of control in our lives. Are we always feeling like other people have the control? And if so, why are we afraid? And bringing that into consciousness, like I said, or that we feel the need to control others. Because if that's the case, often that's based on insecurity from the past, where we feel that, we have to have the upper hand or get one over on the other people because we're simply trying to control them so that they don't control us. So what does that stem from, right? So, and again, perhaps it's based on some of that past mythology that we discussed, and that trying to control others to do our bidding or have it our way is based on part of our story that really no longer necessarily applies. Now, as the Gemini New Moon solar eclipse is going to occur next week on June 10th, it will be about planting a new seed that allows us to write a new story. And that seed can grow and blossom into a new way to identify the information that we perceive as relevant and important enough to incorporate into our assessment and beliefs about what is the overall meaning of our lives. Remember, Mercury, Gemini, and Sagittarius are tied together as 180-degree opposites, polar opposites. So, Gemini is kind of, they often talk about Jupiter as the journey, right? But really, Gemini is the journey. Gemini is like getting out of your house and into your car and driving in the local roads. And then once you get past that, you're sort of moving into Jupiter's Sagittarius journey, because you're getting farther and farther away from your origins. So the origin is very important because, again, the whole thing that I've been saying is that our personal beliefs are formed in our early life. And Gemini represents early childhood, and that's why it's related to learning. It's learning elementary information, and that's how we take that information and we out into the world, right? And it forms our foundation. So again, we're looking at where we are at a crossroads now, and how we can find, as I said, new ways to identify newer, more relevant and important information that we can now repair the older foundation with, so that we can develop this newer story. It's not overthrowing the old mythology, it's sort of correcting it, right? It's like saying, oh, I always thought blah, blah, blah. I didn't know that wasn't true. So what's true and what's not true? That's a whole nother discussion. But again, Mercury's Gemini can represent a crossroads, and society certainly can be described that way, given all the confusing and contradictory information with which we've been bombarded constantly in this social media, and definitely to a certain extent mainstream media world, right? Since both luminaries combine with Mercury in Gemini at this solar eclipse, and Venus in Cancer is waxing toward a square to Chiron in Aries, it's a good time to review this old mythological story we're living and to revise and rewrite it now. We're planting that seed for a happier ending. Now, I'll have much more to say about this next week in my upcoming newsletter, which I hope to get out by Monday. So if you aren't signed up, please do. And if you want to check it out on my Facebook page, by all means, please do. So now I'd like to turn to a deeper discussion of some of the greater nuances of this eclipse season by introducing today's guest. RONNIE GALE DREYER, an internationally known astrological consultant, lecturer, teacher, and author, specializes in both Western and Indian astrology and is based in New York City. She's lectured at national and international astrology groups and conferences, and her clients and students come from many different countries and all walks of life. The author of several books translated into multiple languages, RONNIE served as editor and/or contributor to numerous anthologies, and co-authored a chapter on Indian astrology in the anthology Religious Transformation in Modern Asia with Dr. Nicholas Campion. Most proud of her MA in South Asian Languages and Cultures from Columbia University, RONNIE was a guest lecturer on Indian cosmology for the MA Distance Learning Program in Cultural Astronomy at the University of Wales. Currently, she's co-translating Indian astrological texts in Sanskrit. RONNIE conducts ongoing classes in Indian astrology and webinars on all subjects astrological, including an annual webinar on the year ahead, which notes eclipses, planetary stations, ingresses, and notable aspects. To find current information on all these and more, and/or to sign up for her newsletter, go to ronniedreyer.com, and we'll give that information again at the end so you have the proper spelling. So welcome, Ronnie. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for agreeing to return. And, we've already had that discussion, and you've got my apologies about the typical snafus from last week. So I'm just really thrilled that you could find the time to be here today. So I really appreciate it. Let's start by talking about, I know we're a little over a week past the Sagittarius full moon lunar eclipse and a week away, so we're really in the middle. But can you tell us what's most important to know about the one that's already passed, the May 26th Sagittarius full moon lunar eclipse?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I also use the sidereal zodiac, so I don't focus as much on the signs. What I focus on more are the the fact that, first of all, it's an eclipse that is total. It's a total lunar eclipse, and it is actually the first total lunar eclipse since the one from January 2019. I mean, we don't always get those total eclipses, and that's, of course, why it's called the flower blood moon, because it appeared, very, very red in the sky, and it was total. And we're going to have, of course, another total solar eclipse coming next week. So that's why these are also, well, it's not total, I should say, it's annular. But annular is also very, very, very close to being like a total eclipse, because of the fact that when you have the moon coming between the Earth and the sun, the shadow it casts, is very direct. But the thing is that these eclipses also are, we're going in this month from lunar to solar. So that also means that we're hitting a waning moon cycle. And all the eclipses this year are doing that. They're going from waning, which means sometimes you get the full moon coming before the new moon, or the new moon coming before the full moon. So this one has the full moon coming to the new moon. So it's waning. So it means it can be a little bit more exceptional in terms of being, very intense. And I like taking them in pairs. So, to take them and say one or another, but it is like eclipse season. And the one next week, for instance, because of the fact that it is annular, it is going to be seen throughout Canada. And it is also going to be seen in around Greenland. And it's going to be 75% visible if you look at the totality of it in the United States, in Washington. So I think that we are heading towards a period of, great intensity, also because we had Mercury and Saturn stations around the eclipse. And, my thing is that I do so much work with eclipses that when I see planets stationing around an eclipse, I actually have made a whole list of them for the last 20 years. And you find a lot of times that when you have a Saturn retrograde around an eclipse, or Uranus retrograde, or any planet that's malefic, Mars retrograde around the eclipse, or the station, meaning when it goes from, retrograde to direct, but mostly direct to retrograde, you get really major events in the world. And I think that because Saturn retrograded on May 23rd, Mercury on May 29th, the eclipse on May 26th, the June 10th is the date of the next solar eclipse, and Saturn is doing its second square to Uranus, and it's going to be exact on June 14th, but it's also around there. So my point is that when you have an eclipse with a lot of planetary energy close to that date, you know that there's going to be a lot of things happening in the world, because it's not just because of the eclipse, it's because of the planetary stations, and because of that heavy Saturn-Uranus square, which is a year-long event, but happening 3 times, and this one is the second hit. So it's really important. It's a really, and as you talk about the Pluto-Mars opposition, I mean, there are so many things going on in the sky right now, and as we see in the world, I think we can see a lot of major shifting and major changes right now. Israel, which just went into a ceasefire, but more even, I think, notable right now is that they formed a coalition, and Netanyahu is going to lose his prime minister position, which is very, very important for the world, So anything that happens during an eclipse even if it's happening in a specific country, has ramifications throughout the world.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I was just reading about Netanyahu last night, and thinking that, he was in power far longer than someone like Trump, but he really, brought the country right, which is what Trump did too, and how he's falling from grace, sort of, right? We'll see. And then simultaneously, they reported, like, 2 days ago or something, that Trump, who had a blog for a month, ceased writing. See, I mean, we don't think he actually wrote it, but, that he ceased trying to communicate through writing. This is another Mercury retrograde thing. So this is very interesting. I think it'll be interesting to watch the analogies, because Netanyahu's already been, trying to avoid going to trial or whatever. He's been accused of corruption for years. And Trump is now just starting to, that's starting to heat up. So that is an interesting thing.
Well, it's interesting also because of the fact that, look, when you're dealing with eclipses on a very personal level, you have to see, if they are conjoining or close to things in your chart. But even if you don't have a degree that's close to it, and, you're going to also always have it in a house. You're always going to have it somewhere. So for a year and a half, like the nodes, it's going to go through a certain area of your chart, certain signs. I mean, the May 26th eclipse was at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. If you do sidereal, it's 11 Scorpio. And if you do, and the solar eclipse is going to be at tropical 19 Gemini, sidereal 25 Taurus. The thing that's very important about these eclipses is that a lot of times every 6 months you have like what I call twin eclipses. So if you go back to November 30th, because this is May 26th, it's 6 months later, and the degree of that eclipse was 8 degrees of Gemini. So it means that if you have anything in between 5 and 8, you're probably affected, by both of them. Sidereally, that was 14 Taurus. And then you go to December 14th, and that's kind of around 6 months apart from the June 10th eclipse. And that was 23 Sag. So this one's 19. So if you have something in the middle of that, then you're getting hit by both of those eclipses. So, and that one was 29 sidereal. But the point is that because of that, and because of the fact that I always look at the nodes, because when the node hits an eclipse degree, that's very, very, very important. And when I do my year ahead classes, which I do at the end of every year for the next year, I noted, and I always put it in my handouts, that, for instance, the node of the moon was exact on January 2nd in terms of this next solar eclipse degree. That node was exactly the same degree as this next very powerful solar eclipse, which is going to be seen 75% through Washington. And that's 4 days prior to the insurrection. But when you're looking at it in the ephemeris, you can see that degree, it was on that degree, if you use the true nodes, for like 3 months. It might have been exact on January 2nd, but all through November, December, and January, it was close to this degree of this solar eclipse. So everything that's happening now started back then. You know what I mean? So we're resonating now. Like you said, we're having an investigation into, what's his name? The Postmaster General. We're having everything that's related to what happened at the end of last year. The vaccine was, came out around the eclipse of November 30th, and that is also now, reaching proportions where so many people are vaccinated. There's so many things happening that started around November, December, January that are kind of peaking now. And it's in your personal life too. Go back to those months and look in your chart, because those things are going to peak now. And the one from May 26th, the node, the south node will hit that degree of the lunar eclipse degree on September 6th coming up. So that one is starting something. So it's like they're all interwoven with intensity this year. It's like every time you turn around, there's something else happening. And with eclipse season, I always say it's when you discover things get revealed, things come out in the open. And so we are just going to be, with this Saturn Uranus square, with these retrograde stations, this is going to be a time of like one day after the next. I just read that Matt Gaetz is, of course, is investigated. But, not to say that the eclipse is left wing or right wing. It's not. We just discovered bodies in Kamloops in British Columbia.
I saw that. Yes, weird.
Horrible. This last weekend, over 200 indigenous bodies of children that were buried.
Yeah. Well, let me back you up for just a second, and this is I'm being selfish, okay? Because I do remember when I had you on, and your sensitive degrees, so you're a year ahead. I attended that, but anybody here listening, this gal is it. If you want to know about the eclipses a year ahead, sensitive degrees, in other ways, you got to sign up for her webinars and stuff. But anyway, the November 30th was at 8:38 Gemini.
Yeah.
I have an 8:37 Gemini midheaven. So I recall that because that degree the nodes hadn't hit that degree yet, that's not going to happen actually until somewhere around August 6th. So that particular lunar eclipse started something, right? Which will August, and the solar eclipse had already started and ended in December. Was that right?
The solar eclipse of December 14th, the node hit that degree in September. Yeah, so between September and December. Yeah, that was very heavy.
An election eclipse or something.
Right, exactly.
So I'm saying now that the May 26th one also begins then and culminates around September 6th?
Yeah.
Solar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the solar one we already hit because that's 19 gems, so that was started on January 2nd and will culminate at the actual eclipse on June 10th, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean, it stays hot. I mean, it's not like you have an eclipse and it goes away. Whatever starts around that time, is going to obviously continue because it is such an intense degree. I mean, you're also going to get the trine from Saturn, that's going to come to 19 degrees, as well. And basically, you can look and see, every time, you have a Mars square or something like that. But the nodes are, for me, the real powerful sort of length of those eclipses, because they bring things out and they intensify things. And because I use the true node, it hangs around a degree for quite a while around the eclipse. So the node of the moon, for instance, if you go back to November, November, December, the end of November, it was already at 19 degrees and it stayed there throughout January. So you had 3 months from November through January of the node really hitting that eclipse degree. And that makes a lot of sense if you are looking at, things that are going on, let's say in this country, or, what's going on in terms of, the election, or even things that are going on in terms of, just the world in general with the pandemic, that things have kind of gotten, the vaccine was rolled out at that exact time, the end of November. And so there have been a lot of fits and starts with it. It wasn't like the vaccine rolled out and suddenly it was available to everybody. You know what I mean? There were so many different intrigues around it, and still are. They had to recall Johnson & Johnson, and then we have all these people who don't want to take the vaccine. That's okay. I mean, people, not everybody wants to take the vaccine, and now they're kind of having all these lotteries and they're kind of raffles, and these states are giving out all these rewards if you take the vaccine.
I'm happy with the donut. I'm happy with the free donut. I forget which donut company it is, but there's not one near me. I'm like, is it worth it to drive like 30 miles to find one of these donut shops so I can get my free donut,
It's really crazy, but this also this eclipse, the one on June 10th, it's not like just the node was at that degree, but then Mars came to that degree in April. And April also was a very intense month because that's when we had so many people vaccinated, but look what happened in India. In India, it went the opposite way. I mean, we had like a second wave there that's still going on. And then shortly after that in May, we had, the bombings and the missiles in Gaza. So it's just been a very heavy time. It's not only because of the eclipses, of course not. There's all these things happening in the sky. But because these eclipses seem to all roll into each other, that's what the interesting thing is with these degrees, is that they kind of all, the degrees of the nodes are sort of coming all together, one after the other, hitting one eclipse after the other. So the whole year is that intensity. I think the good news is that next year, when the nodes change signs and the eclipses change signs, we're going to kind of come out of this, on the other end. But, but right now, I think the thing is that the reason this eclipse is also important, as I said, is because we have those squares and we have the retrogrades. But if you look at this next one, the one on June 10th, the other thing that's kind of really interesting about it is that not only is Mercury retrograde, but it's like completely combust. I mean, it is totally, or what you would call, very closely connected in a conjunction, with the sun. So, that is a very, very, well, in ancient times, that would be considered really ominous, because it would mean that Mercury is getting eclipsed. It's getting obstructed because it's combust. You can't see it. So again, Mercury, what does Mercury have to do with? It has to do with communication. It has to do with business. It has to do with, traders, with that kind of society. So now look what's happening with also this hacking that is going on, these cyber.
I just saw that too. I don't think I didn't have time to really do much news reading yesterday, so I was catching up early this morning, and I was like, yeah, there was a hack to the MTA in New York, the Mass Transit Association, and then there was another one. I don't know if it's the same not the oil pipeline from a few weeks ago, and something else. Yeah.
Yes, meat packing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really, really insane. And if you think about it and look at it, Mercury, because the sun is moving forward and Mercury is retrograding, moving backwards, and then at some point, they meet. And so, like when they meet and they are, on around that same degree, between the 10th, 11th, 12th, they are going to be, combust. And that's the other thing that happens, is that when you have that on an eclipse, at least in, ancient times, they really said that was not a very good thing for whatever Mercury represents. And of course, in ancient times, let's say, at least in the Indian system, it says that the learned would be damaged, kings, princes, because Mercury rules youth, it rules princes. It's quite interesting. So it's kind of like communication now has a very different tone, of course, than it did in ancient times. So we have to look at Mercury as being communication, transportation, and the airwaves. This whole cyber hacking has so much to do with this. But because that eclipse, whatever happens on an eclipse, I think is very important. And because that Mercury is so combust on the 10th, its exact combustion is going to be the 11th to the 12th. I think that those few days, are really, really, really important. Mercury then goes direct on the 22nd. But I think that that's one of the things that normally Mercury retrograde happens so frequently that I don't freak out by it. But when I see it on an eclipse, I really look at this eclipse season as being very, very defined by that Mercury retrograde,
Do you think, though, a couple of things. One thing is I just want to explain to the audience what combust is, because there are some people listening who might not know. So, why don't you tell them what the traditional is on that?
So combustion is when the sun and another planet are so close together that, especially in classical times, astrology as we know it now, we're all doing on computers, but astrology started because people observed the sky. So when they would observe planets, especially Mercury and Venus, which traveled pretty quickly, they would look at the sky and suddenly they wouldn't see it for a few days at a time. And that is when it comes so close to the sun that the sun obliterates it. It's like when we have a new moon and the sun is so close to the moon, we can't see the moon. And you can take, it depends on the number of degrees you want to take. I mean, I usually take about 5 or 6 degrees, but when you look at it, it's really what we in present day call a conjunction. A conjunction, in modern kind of psychological or just modern terms, we like to give it a positive spin and say Sun and Mercury are working together, or Sun and Venus are working together. But every other actually Mercury or Venus conjunction is when it's retrograde. And that's the one where it's close to the Earth. So that's why you really couldn't see it. So right now you can't, Mercury and the Sun are they're going to be a degree apart on the day of the eclipse, which is June 10th. And then because Mercury moves backwards and the Sun moves forward, it's going to be exact. So there will be like about at least a week where Mercury and the Sun would be, let's say I would say within 5 degrees of each other from about June, let's say about June 7th to about June 14th. You'd have Mercury and the Sun 5 degrees apart. And that's what's called combust. Now, in Babylonian astrology, they have what's called cazimi, which means that if they are within 30 minutes of arc, that's wonderful, that it's really strengthens the Mercury and Venus. I don't know about that, but I think when it's with an eclipse, you really have to look at that Sun Mercury. The Sun is just overpowering the Mercury. Sun has to do also with power. And Mercury has to do with the people, with people, with communication, with siblings. So it's kind of an interesting sort of thing to watch. I mean, a lot of times I don't know myself what's going to happen. And in hindsight, you could say, oh, interesting,
Well,
So
when you said princes, Mercury being young people, my mind flashed on Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi. I wonder if anything's going to happen with him.
Interesting.
We'll just throw it out there and see what happens,
Well, princes are also, they are also the younger generation. I mean, of anybody, you can look at it, yes, the younger generation of the rulers of any country, but you can also look at it as, let's say, the people who are in training to be in power, or your own, the place of business, who are the people next in line, kind of, because the prince is next in line if the king or queen pass away, so that becomes, who takes the reins. It's also youth. Princes are young when they become king. I always think of that wonderful in Shakespeare, for instance, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, and then Henry V. When the first play starts out, Henry is this, carefree young prince, hangs out with Falstaff, and then he becomes the king, and he changes overnight. He becomes the leader and responsible and things like that.
I wonder if, because you make me think now of Britain's Prince Charles.
Also.
Now, he's not young, but he is her child. And or not, there's some speculation, right, that if she retires or whatever it's called, that technically the throne would go to him, no?
Yeah, I mean, but it's also not necessarily a positive thing because you're combusting. The sun is overpowering the communication because Mercury is already retrograde. So, you know what I mean? So when you get that retrograde Mercury on the day of the eclipse, I don't know, it would just be interesting. Look between June 7th and 14th. Yeah, we're going to look at our communication anyway due to the Mercury retrograde, but because it's that eclipse, I think some of these things that are happening and things get revealed. So I think it's very possible we're all going to find out, Is Russia responsible for all this stuff? Biden is supposed to meet with Putin in Geneva. I don't know exactly the date of that, but it's in the next couple weeks, as well. So, yeah, these are all kind of really interesting things. But it really has to do with the fact that the reason this eclipse, this next one, is, I think, so important is because of the fact that it's during this retrograde season, so to speak. Neptune was also, during that November 30th eclipse, when the vaccine got rolled out. Neptune went direct the day before the eclipse on November 29th. So again, you had something happen that was that came to the attention of the world. I mean, things happen all the time in different countries, but when you have an eclipse, the world takes note of it. The other thing that happened, and this is the other thing that's very important, I think, is that around that time, the 29th or 28th of November, the head of the whole nuclear division in Iran was assassinated, if we remember, and that still has not been completely resolved, who did it and any revenge taking. So that's the other thing that's interesting right now, because as I said, this November 30th eclipse is very connected with the May 26th one, because the degrees are only 4 degrees apart. So again, I think some of that's going to start coming to light. I think this thing with Iran, I've been saying that for the last 6 months. I still am waiting, but I think that they're just waiting somehow. I don't know. There's something that makes me very uneasy about that, I guess. And also remember that it's very interesting that Israel is so in the news now with their election, of course. This is all going to be coming out. And this whole thing with Israel in the next 2 weeks is going to be interesting. And India also is having this great pandemic, which should be on the wane now. But they also became countries under the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And Saturn is now opposite that degree. You know what I mean? The Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Leo between 1947 and 48, when India was formed and then Israel was formed, the Saturn in the sky now is hitting those degrees. That's interesting. I mean, obviously it's nothing to do with the eclipse. It's just an aside. And when you say India, it's also Pakistan. When you say Israel, it's also the other countries that they had to partition. So it's kind of interesting that they're both kind of in the news,
Right. Ronnie, your stuff is so interesting. No, I do. I know, I'm sincere.
I get started and I can't I go like my wheels start spinning,
Wealth of information, but we got about 3 minutes left, and I don't lose the opportunity for you to tell everybody what you're up to now. Aren't you having another webinar soon, or did you?
Well, this is what I am doing. I always do a year ahead, like around December. And what I've been doing last year, and I'm doing it again this year, is I'm going to do the next 6 months. And that's going to be on Thursday evening, July 15th. And anybody who signed up for my webinar in December does it for free. And if you sign up for this new one, the next 6 months, you will also get the recording from December. So it's kind of like a review of the last 6 months and a projection of the next 6 months, and adding to what we talked about, because things happen all the time. So you have to adjust. And you can find the information about that on my website, ronniedreyer.com. As Sherry said in the beginning, and you can sign up for my newsletter there too. But that's one of the things I'm excited about doing in July. And you get the recording if you can't do it live. It's no big, And
I want to clarify, it's Ronnie, RONNIE, and Dreyer is DREYER.com, right, Ronnie?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Anything else that's going on? Are you speaking anywhere, or virtually or otherwise?
Yeah, I have a few virtual things that are coming up. And also I'm starting new classes in Indian astrology. I'm speaking at an Indian astrology event, a women's Indian astrology event in July. I'm also going to be later on speaking virtually at the AA conference, the the UK has their Astrological Association conference every year. That's not until October. I'm going to be speaking at the astrology gathering at Lilydale at the end of September. All this is on my website. Oh. That one's in person. So yeah, there's a few things coming up, but I still want to get through this eclipse season.
Right. But you can find all that on your website, right?
Yeah, everything's on my website. But
I'm waiting. Yeah, I get it. I mean, we all,
Well, I think that this is an interesting eclipse season, like I said, because of those retrogrades, and then because of Saturn Uranus, right after the eclipse next week. It's like kind of all happening together. It's like, which one do you focus on first?
Right, right. Well, I'm going to be there, honey. I'm going to be there. You are just so thank you, because no, this stuff is so valuable, and a lot of people, are not really so focused and pinpointing, some of the stuff in these sensitive reads. I think it's really, really insightful. It's really interesting, and it's really impactful for those of us who follow it. So I want to thank you, Ronnie, and I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. I hope you've all found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week on June 10th for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go.